What's up, booktube? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm wrapping up my November reading month. In November, I read 5 books. I DNF'd 2 and I put down 1 to read for later. I just wasn't in the mood for it, but I'll get to that later on. Giving me a grand total of 2,113 pages. So like not a bad reading month for me, and it's not as good as I've had in the past. I feel like I say that every single month. I'm just like gradually decreasing my page count as the months go on, but like not a big deal, so whatever. The page count and like number of books doesn't matter too much to me. I would like to see it be up a little bit higher, so I'm hoping in December I'll have the chance to read a bit more and actually finish the TBR that Operation gave me. I did start everything, so I didn't take a punishment for my December TBR. I DNF'd 2 of them, so I guess I'll start with those. The first book that I DNF'd was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I was so hyped for this book, and like it was going to be my first book by this author, and I was so excited for it, but it just wasn't for me. I liked the writing, but just like the premise and the characters, I had zero interest in. I got about, I want to say 75 pages in or so, give or take, and I was just not vibing with it whatsoever, so I DNF'd it. I do still want to try other books by Naomi Novik. I just don't think this one's for me. I'm really not a fan of like dark academia books. I'm learning that the hard way, which brings me to my next DNF, which was Catherine House. Same thing, just minus the monsters. It's kind of dark academia and I just was not feeling it whatsoever. This one, I think I only got about 40 pages in before I called it quits. I just really didn't care about any of the characters. The writing was decent, but again, with the characters and the premise and everything, I would just really, was not for me. But then the book that I started and then put down was The King of Crows by Libba Bray. This is the 4th and final book in the Diviners series. I'm kind of on the fence about if I'm excited for it or not, because the series has been kind of lukewarm for me. But I tried reading this one for Tome Topple and I just was not in the mood for it. I had just finished another book that was kind of a similar concept. It was kind of dark and ghosty, and I just was not in the mood to read another book that like with a similar premise. And I'm the type where I cannot force myself to read a book if I don't want to read it. So I got maybe 10 pages into it and said, yeah, you know what? Like if I try and force myself to read it right now, I'm going to end up hating it. So I'm just going to put it down and read it a different time when I actually want to read it, and then I will maybe have a chance of enjoying it. So those are the 3 books that I didn't finish this month. So let's just get into the stats and then I'll go over my reviews for the books that I did read this month. So for the 5 books that I did read this month, I got 1 from the library, 1 from Scribd, and 3 of them I owned. I read 1 ebook, 3 print books, and 2 audiobooks. 3 of these books were fantasy, 1 was a romance, and 1 was nonfiction. 3 were for an adult audience and 2 of them were YA. And then my star rating breakdown, I read 1 2-star, 2 3-star, 1 4-star, and 1 5-star. Okay, and so the first book that I read this month was The Little Book of Hygge by Meik Wiking. This is a nonfiction book about how to live a happier life. It's written by a man who works at the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen, and Denmark is known to be one of the happiest countries in the world, and they have this notion called Hygge that is basically just about finding like little moments throughout your day that bring you a sense of joy and togetherness with others or by yourself as well. It's basically just about, you know, finding little things like lighting candles and having a warm cup of tea and a good book with a comfy blanket thrown around you, or like sitting in comfortable silence with your friends after a long day of adventuring together. It's a really cute idea and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was a lot of fun to read and like very, very quick as well. And the book is full of like these little photos and everything. So it's a very, very quick and easy read. There's like recipes, a lot of stats as well. So if you're super nerd and like stats like I do, then this is definitely the book for you. And I thought it was just a really interesting look at, you know, how to live a happy life and different kinds of ways that people can accomplish that, as well as kind of looking into like different kind of cultural norms. This book is mainly about Denmark, but they also discuss other countries and their customs and like kind of similar concepts from other cultures. So I thought it was a really interesting take on that and it was fun to read about. They also talk about Canada a lot in this, so I was very happy about that. I love like reading stats about my own country because we're often forgotten about in everything. So that was a nice little tidbit for me. But overall, a very fun read. I would definitely recommend it if you were interested in this kind of thing. It was a lot of fun and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Next up, I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and this was incredible. I gave it 5 stars. Like, without a doubt, this book is one of my favorites, not just of the year, but of all time. Top 10 for sure, maybe even top 5. This book was just incredible. It was so beautiful and atmospheric, and it read like poetry. It was so, so beautiful. This one is about a girl who was born in the 1700s in France, and she's being forced to marry a man who she does not want to marry. She wants to live a life free and on her own, so she runs away on her wedding day, and she prays to a god, and he answers answers her. So she makes a deal with him where she will live as long as she wants to until she no longer wants to live. But of course, there's always a trick, and she quickly learns after the deal has been sealed that yes, she will live forever, but she's lost the ability to be remembered. So the moment that she is out of eyesight, whoever she was speaking to completely forgets who she is. So yes, she's able to live a life free and untethered from others, but she cannot leave a mark on the world and goes about her life as a ghost. Until after 300 years of this, she meets a man at a bookstore in New York City who remembers her name. This was such a unique, interesting book. I have no idea how V. Schwab managed to write this, because like this is a very difficult book to write. So big kudos to V. Schwab for like managing to pull this off so beautifully. I thought this was brilliantly done. It was interesting and just so beautiful. I cannot express to you how gorgeous the writing in this is. It does not feel like her other books that I've read so far, at least. This feels like a completely different kind of experience. It's not really about the plot so much, it's just kind of the characters and the atmosphere and just kind of living this character's life with her as she goes along, and all of the heartache and the happiness and everything that she experiences, it kind of becomes your own. You can feel the loneliness of this character and it just kind of becomes you, and I really cannot get over this book. It was absolutely incredible. I really don't know what else that I can say about it aside from it was wonderful and everything that I could possibly want in a book. But just oh man, I'm so glad that I read this book. It was amazing. After that, I read Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the, what's it called, The Last Hours? Yeah, The Last Hours series, which is a new trilogy, I think, set in the world of the Shadowhunters. This one takes place after the events of the Infernal Devices and follows the children of the characters from that series. I was very nervous going into this book. I've talked about a few times on this channel that I used to be obsessed with this world, but gradually over the years, I've pretty much completely lost interest in it and just fallen out of love with it. But I did read Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy earlier this year, and I did really enjoy that one. And we get to meet James, who's a character in this book, briefly in that book, and I fell in love with him. He's like such a sweetheart. So I was actually pretty excited to read this book, and I was pleasantly surprised. I did actually really enjoy it. I gave it a solid 3 stars, so like not the best thing that I've ever read, but definitely not the worst by far. I did actually have a good time reading this book. It wasn't perfect. I thought that it was very long. It did not need to be this long at all. But you know, I liked all the characters and the plot was okay. I was more so there for the characters, which is where I kind of contradict myself, because my main point of interest for this book was the characters and the relationships between all of them. So I was really interested in, you know, what everybody was doing and didn't really care about the actual plot, like whatsoever. But with that said, my biggest downfall for this book was that there were just too many characters, which like is kind of confusing because I liked all the characters and I wanted to know where all of them were going, but I feel like there was just too much going on in this one book that it was really hard to follow for me. I kept forgetting who was who and like who was doing what and who knew who and who dated who, and it was just, there's just so much going on that I could not follow it whatsoever. I had to keep going back and like finding chapters where I was like, oh yeah, okay, so this person did that before, and you know, in this chapter they talked about being here with this person, and okay, yeah, now I'm set again. But I kept having to do that over and over again because I couldn't keep it straight in my head because there was just too many characters. But overall, it was still pretty good. I'm actually pretty pleased with how this book went. The plot of it now, I don't even remember what happened with the actual plot, barely. The plot was definitely the weakest point for me, but the characters are pretty strong in this one. But yeah, overall, pretty good. Not bad. Didn't like love it, but I also didn't hate it, so it was good solid 3-star read for me. The 4th book that I read was The Devouring Gray by Lynn Herman. It was one that I'd had on my TBR for a long time, and then I kind of lost interest in it, but I had a few people recently kind of re-interest me. I don't know how to word that properly, but you know what I mean. So I was pretty excited for it, and unfortunately I ended up not really liking it. I gave it a 2.5-ish, give or take. It just wasn't really for me. I liked parts of it. I liked the diversity that was in it. A lot of the characters were bisexual, including a bi male character and bisexual parents, which I really enjoyed. Like I very rarely see either of those in books, so that was really nice to see. There was also a character who only had one hand, and I thought that was handled like decently well. It did kind of become like her only character trait. I liked how the author showed that she can still be a badass, sword-wielding, strong-ass bitch. Like, it was so cool. I did really enjoy that, but it was mentioned like constantly. Every single time that character was present, either from her perspective or like written from somebody else's, her arm was mentioned every single time. So it kind of felt like, you know, she didn't really have much other personality aside from that. But overall, I really enjoyed that character. But I did find this book to be lacking in terms of the plot and the setting. The setting was okay. It wasn't my favorite. I did expect a lot more out of it, but the plot is where it really fell short for me. I found the plot to be so cheesy. It was not creepy at all. I was almost laughing through most of it. It was bordering on cringy, so it wasn't really for me. I'm not sure if I would have had a different experience if I had read the book physically or an ebook instead of the audiobook, because I really did not like the narrator. It sounded like one of those dramatic readings that people do for comedy, so I just could not take the plot seriously whatsoever. I also found that the dialogue between the characters was very odd. Again, that may have been the narrator of the audiobook, but I just found all of it to be so cheesy and like not really in the fun way. Like, I love the kind of cheesy, spooky stories, but this one didn't feel like it was supposed to be, and so it was just kind of awkward. So overall, it was just not for me. I can totally see why others would like it, and I do plan to read the second book at some point or another. But anyways, I get why others like it. It was just not my thing. And finally, I read Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This one I gave either a low 4 or a 3.5. I think I'm leaning more towards the 3.5, but this one is an adult contemporary romance set at a Ren fair, which is such a cute concept, and it was very, very cute. I did really like this book. It wasn't perfect. I found some aspects to be kind of lacking. It was kind of slow, I thought, which like normally I like the slow burn romance, but I found the actual like events of the plot to be very slow, and like I was kind of like, okay, come on, like do something. It was just a little bit too long for the romance to get kicked up, and then it was all of a sudden very intense. They kind of went from like 0 to 100 very fast, which isn't really my thing, but I still thought that the romance was very cute, and I enjoyed it. And this was one of the very rare times where I actually agreed with the conflict. Normally in romance, I hate the conflict part because it's just so unrealistic, and like usually I'm just like, why are you even fighting about that? But in this case, I actually thought that the conflict was justified, and that has probably never happened before in a romance novel ever. So that was really nice. But I liked how things were resolved, and the like grand apology thing was very, very cheesy, but it was cheesy in the good way, so I did really enjoy that as well. But overall, this was a pretty cute read, kind of a slow read, but you know, that's okay. And that is it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Some pretty good reads, nothing that was like outright terrible, so that's always good. And you know, a new all-time favorite. Not gonna complain. A good month overall. So that'll do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!